What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Basketball Society YouTube page. We are here to live stream with you guys to talk about the NBA draft. I'm here with Ralph and Aram from the Basketball Society, of course. And we're going to jump right into starting to reveal our mock draft and really getting deep in there to talk about which one of these guys should go to which team. So, without further ado, let's start this off. So our first 5 picks, we're going to be going 5 picks at a time here. So our first 5 picks, we have, of course, Markelle Fultz going to the Sixers. We have Lonzo Ball going to the Lakers at number 2. We have Jason Tatum going to the Celtics at number 3. We have Josh Jackson going to the Suns at number 4. And De'Aaron Fox going to the Kings at number 5. So, Ralph, let's start with you. What are your initial thoughts here?
Well, we know that Markelle Fultz is going number 1 for sure. Lonzo as well going to number 2 because, D'Angelo got traded, so they need a point guard. And the real interesting storyline here is number 3 with Boston. They can go Josh Jackson, of course. But we elected to go for Jason Tatum. Just because he's a better fit for what the Celtics have around now. They could just score like Tatum. So I'd give Tatum to Boston and Jackson with the Suns.
All right. Aaron, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so as Ralph said, the first 2 picks right now seem pretty obvious. The Sixers wouldn't have traded up to number 1 if it weren't for Markelle Fultz. If they weren't going to pick him. It'd make no sense whatsoever. So Sixers are going to go Markelle Fultz number 1. The Lakers are a little iffy, at number 2. Lonzo Ball still seems like the obvious pick, given that they just got rid of D'Angelo Russell. I'm with that coalition that thinks, okay, yeah, Lonzo Ball and D'Angelo Russell really would have worked together very well. And it's a little unfortunate that we won't get to see that happen. I know a bunch of Laker fans here, including Ralph, are probably really upset about that. But you know what? Lonzo Ball has to be the picker. Otherwise, it really just doesn't make sense. Yeah, as Ralph said, number 3, Jason Tatum. That's who we're deciding on right now.
Already got the Brooklyn hat going.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just saying.
So Jason Tatum at number 3. So the Celtics here, this is where the draft is really interesting for me because the Celtics can either go with 2 guys, Josh Jackson or Jason Tatum. And Josh Jackson, he's got a little Jaylen Brown type in him, in that he's a great defender, unsure about his offensive game. So if the Celtics are gonna go full-fledged at Jimmy Butler, if they're really gonna get him, it doesn't make much sense for them to get someone like Josh Jackson when, Jason Tatum's the more complete player. That's what you can get with Tatum right now. Josh Jackson, he's a guy where, okay, because of guys like Avery Bradley, Isaiah Thomas, guys who can handle the ball, you don't really need what you'll need Josh Jackson for is the shooting ability. So that's where we kind of went with this. That's why we said, okay, Tatum will probably go 3 to Celtics. And then because with the Suns, you have Eric Bledsoe. It doesn't seem like they're willing to move him yet. We haven't really heard anything on that front. So that's a little iffy right now. But if they're going to keep Eric Bledsoe, they do have T.J. Warren. They got Devin Booker, but Josh Jackson seems like the best pick there because he's best available at that time. And then finally, the 5th pick, De'Aaron Fox to the Kings. That seems like the most obvious. We had heard like 2-3 weeks ago that the Kings were willing to trade 5 and 10 to move up to even possibly number 3 or 2 to get De'Aaron Fox so they could grab him. So that is a no-brainer. Kings are going to get De'Aaron Fox at number 5 if he's there. No doubt.
Yep. I completely agree. And of course, I know myself, I know Aram, a lot of people are excited. Sixers fans are excited that we're finally going to get Markelle Fultz. And so that is definitely exciting. Lonzo Ball to the Lakers, that's really been set in stone, like you guys have pretty much said ever since LeVar
broken
Ball
into
said he's only
existence.
going to the Lakers. So,
Wow.
and then Jason Tatum, I completely agree with you guys. He's the better fit for Boston. Boston really looks like they want to win now, especially they want to make those moves to get either Butler or Paul George. I do agree with our guy here in the chat, Joe Hackney. I think the Celtics should go after Butler. I think he would be a perfect guy for Brad Stevens' system personally, but that's outside of the actual draft. But yeah, so I think Jason Tatum would be the perfect fit for them. And then with the Suns, also agree. Josh Jackson is the most logical one there with all of the guards that they currently have, with the Devin Bookers, the Bledsoes, the Knights, those kind of guys. Like if you already have all of them, there's no need for the De'Aaron Fox. And then the Kings, I mean, the last time they really had a starting caliber point guard that they kept the entire time was probably like, so they definitely need to go point guard here. So yeah, I mean, these top five, I don't want to say they're cut and dry because there could be a little bit of movement between 4 and 5, or 3, 4, and 5. Sorry, but yeah, right now I think the top five will go as logically as possible.
I have a question for you guys. So for some reason, Suns at number 4, they take De'Aaron Fox. How surprised would you be if they went that way?
I guess I'll take this one. I mean, me personally, I don't think I'd be that surprised. It'd just be the movement that the Suns are making to move Eric Bledsoe, because you're not keeping Bledsoe if you're drafting Fox. So if you're drafting Fox, would I be that surprised? No, not really, because then you're just saying to me, okay, you know what, you're moving Bledsoe and you're just building a young core here with Devin Booker, TJ Warren, and all those guys, and Marquise Chris, of course. So, I mean, the Suns have a lot of good assets. It just depends, okay, do you believe in TJ Warren? Do you believe in Eric Bledsoe? What's your timetable here? Because you know what? That's what the biggest thing should be in the NBA right now. Timetables. That's why I was so surprised by the Lakers trade with D'Angelo Russell, because you're messing with the timetable. You can't be doing that when you got teams like the Warriors and Cavs that are just going to dominate these next couple of years. The Sixers are doing it perfectly. Yeah, you traded future picks, but you traded it for a young kid who's going to be good, really good in 5-6 years when the Warriors are older, when the Cavs are older, when all of those Sixers assets are getting good at the same time. So if the Suns decide to go with De'Aaron Fox at 4, they're realizing, listen, let's not mess with the timetable. Let's set a timetable. We'll be good around the same time as the Sixers and teams like that and Timberwolves, but let's just build for the future now.
Yep. I agree with you.
Yeah. I completely agree too, because I mean that's what everyone's been talking about, especially in the East, is the timeline of, are we going to try and compete with LeBron, or are we going to try and just wait out LeBron? Because obviously it's going to be a lot more difficult waiting out the Golden State Warriors when their 4 guys are under 27 years old, 25 years old. So really it comes down to waiting out LeBron or trying to go up against him. And I feel like the Celtics at one point wanted to wait it out as they got all of those Brooklyn picks, but they found themselves in this situation where that they pretty much need to compete now. But like you said, Aaron, with the Lakers, I was surprised with that too, because yeah, I understand they want to get Paul George and everything, but there's all these reports coming out now that he even said wherever he goes, he's going to make it a rental because he wants to go to the Lakers. So with that on top of it, it's really a head scratcher on what they've been working towards. And as far as the other teams in the East, like the Suns or like the Sixers too, like those guys at least are, I said the Suns are in the East, they're in the West. But those are the guys that are at least have a younger core now and are still planning to keep a younger core as they move forward, which I think is the better move right now.
No arguments there. I mean, if I had to say one thing about what the Lakers are trying to do right now, they're trying to hit a home run, but they're not even batting. They're next. So I don't know what they're trying to do, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, with that point, like even trying to hit a home run, what is hitting a home run when it's just like best case scenario, you're getting Paul George, Brooke Lopez, and other young kids. Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna get a 6th seed and then lose in the first round? Congrats! Like, what? That's not gonna do anything for you, right? Like, so D'Angelo Russell was a good talent who got a lot better his second year than his first year, and that just. I don't know. I couldn't even explain it. I was so surprised when I saw that.
So let me say this question here for the top 5. If the Celtics decide to trade their number 3 pick, let's say let's just do both. If Indiana or Chicago, who do they pick if they get that number 3 pick?
I don't know. If Chicago goes number 3, they're getting De'Aaron Fox, in my opinion. That just seems like the most obvious pick right there because they have no point guard really right now. I mean, I guess if you consider Michael Carter-Williams a point guard, most of us don't, especially Philly guys. But yeah, then they got Jerry Grant. You have Denzel Valentine, so I don't know if Josh Jackson can really work with him, even though I guess Valentine could play some too. But yeah, Chicago for me, De'Aaron Fox seems like the most obvious pick. The kid's great. He's a great leader. But then for Indiana, that's a little more confusing because they don't really have a path right now. We don't see much with them. I would say if they were trade for 3, it'd be best player available, and it'd be Josh Jackson in that sense, just because he has the highest potential out of everyone available then. So yeah, if the Pacers went there, getting rid of Paul George, and you have that blank slate at the small forward position. So, yeah, Josh Jackson, for me, seems like the most obvious pick.
I'm not going to argue on that one. I think those are smart picks, especially De'Aaron Fox. They do need a point guard in Chicago, so you'd go with the best – I mean, the third best point guard prospect, which is no consolations. And, yeah, I agree.
All right, so moving on to 6 through 10. So number 6, Orlando, we have taken Lauri Markkanen. Number 7 for Minnesota, we have Jonathan Isaac. Number 8 for the New York Knicks, we have Dennis Smith Jr. Number 9 at the Mavs, we have Frank Ntilikina. And number 10 for the Kings, we have TJ Leaf. So, Aaron, if you want to start this, initial thoughts for this.
Yeah, so, all right, we'll start with Orlando. There were a couple surprises here. We don't know where Lauri Markkanen is going to go right now just because, it sounds like the Knicks are really invested in him. They like him a lot. But if you're getting Lauri Markkanen, that probably means you're trading Porzingis, and I don't envision that happening. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, if everything stays pat, it makes sense for Orlando to go for someone like Lauri Markkanen. He's a great stretch for the Magic scene. That's a confusing team, is Aaron Gordon a small forward? Is Elfrid Payton your future point guard? Is Evan Fournier and Mario Hezonja, are those your wings? Is Vucevic still going to be your center for years to come? It's such a confusing team right now. We don't know what's going to happen. Lauri Markkanen's a great shooting 7-footer. When I see Markkanen, I do see Porzingis in him. So, that comparison makes sense, but it's not a perfect comparison. Because Porzingis, he's 7'3". 3 inches is a huge difference. And that's something we don't really often talk about. So, Markkanen's going to be a guy who he's not going to bully anyone in the post. He likes that mid-range shot. Orlando, they're in an odd spot right now. Like I said, we don't really know what they're going to do. They could go for someone like Dennis Smith Jr. here if they don't like Elfrid for their future. So, that's really up to the debate who Orlando will go with. But, we went with Lauri, and it's definitely not a bad pick. Then Minnesota, you got Jonathan Isaac there. I think that makes the most sense. You just had Dunn last year. You just got Levine's coming off an ACL, but he showed he can play last year. You got Wiggins. You got Towns. You do have Zhang, But, Zhang can mentor someone like Jonathan Isaac. Jonathan Isaac is very raw. And like I said before when we were talking about the whole Lakers trade, you don't mess with the timetable. And if you're Minnesota, you go with the guy who has the highest potential, who can be someone very good. Isaac, it was terrible comparisons at first. We heard, Kevin Durant. It's not that, because he does have his length. He does have his, a good stroke in that sense, and can attack the rim, but he doesn't have ball handling skills. And that's what makes Durant so good as a 6'11", 7-footer, whatever you want to call him. So, the Isaac Durant comparisons aren't great, but Isaac definitely has some great potential. He shot about like 42% on 2-point jumpers, so that shot is there. He, for the most part, with Florida State, you had Xavier Rattan-Mays and you had Dwayne Bacon as your primary scorers. So Isaac he was a catch and shoot player and just crashed the boards and had some putbacks. I remember early on in the season, and I'm sure if any of you saw this Florida State game, he missed like a wide open layup, which was gigantic, because I think it was like just a couple seconds left, and he ended up losing the game for them because he couldn't hit that. I shouldn't say he lost the game for them, but it was a huge play in the game. So, how's his composure late in games? There are still questions about him, but if you're Minnesota, this just seems like the best pick, because he's got some great potential and could end up being that stretch four that went alongside Cat. There were some obvious defensive mishaps from Towns last year, and that was his big flaw, because he was so great offensively. But, and can Isaac coexist defensively there? Time will tell. But for right now, Isaac definitely seems like the best pick for Minnesota. Moving on. The Knicks, such a weird team right now, just like the Lakers. We don't know what they're going to do at number 8. Dennis Smith Jr. seems like the best pick. I love Dennis Smith Jr. I think he's a great kid. Remember seeing him at the Steph Curry camp like 2 years ago, and he was cooking guys like Isaiah Whitehead, who are now in the NBA with the Brooklyn Nets, and he was a college freshman at the time, so like 2 years apart from Whitehead. And, it's just incredible what the kid can do. He did tear his ACL in high school, and that was a big concern, but he looked great at NC State. We talk so much about Markelle Fultz's bad Washington team, and we compare that to Dennis Smith's bad NC State team. But NC State played very well out of conference. And when you're playing in the ACC and you have Dennis Smith Jr. and then Omar Yurtseven as the only other guy, and he didn't do much at all for them, he really stunk it up. So it was just down to Dennis Smith, and he single-handedly took down teams like Duke when it mattered most. And he showed us a lot last year. And then so for the next, there's Malik Monk there still on the board and all that, but Dennis Smith looks like the best pick, especially because Derrick Rose isn't your future. The only guy you can say on that team that is your future is Porzingis, and I think Dennis Smith would be a lot of fun in pick and rolls with Porzingis. And then 9, we got Ntilikina. This is probably the most obvious one. If Ntilikina is there, the Mavs are going to pick him. We've heard Cuban loves him. All the Mavericks staff loves him, the front office. So if he's going to be there, they're going to take him. Ntilikina, he's kind of a weird option. International guys we never really know about, because at least for me, I've seen maybe one full game from Frank. It's hard to catch full games from these international guys, obviously, because they're not here, and they're not going up against guys that are their same age. That's why Frank, his stats won't look nearly as good. And, when I was watching him, I was a little concerned because he'd stand upright a good amount when he was dribbling the ball. As a point guard, that's very concerning, especially when you're long and someone like Chris Paul is going to, toy with you defensively the entire time. So you're really going to have problems there. His shot, it wasn't bad at all, but, it's still a little concerning. But for a team like with the Mavericks, where I know Dirk was probably one of the best mentors you could possibly have in the history of the NBA, great guy, Frank should do fine learning under another international guy. And then finally at 10, this one I know you guys like a lot, TJ Leaf at number 10. This is definitely a reach. But it does make sense if you're the Kings. You just got De'Aaron Fox. You apparently love Buddy Hield. And you have Willie Cauley-Stein. you have some good young pieces. Scalabissier was there too. So, maybe if they are really invested in Scal and Willie, because they're two young bigs as well, maybe TJ Leaf doesn't make as much sense. But what does make sense is TJ Leaf's ability. I mean, we saw at a point earlier this year, he was shooting like 60% from the field and 50% from deep. You don't see that. He definitely thrived with Lonzo Ball as his point guard. And, let me just say, that's what goes to show you how good Lonzo is. The guys around him who, they aren't creating their own shots, they were knocked out all the time. Holiday and Leaf, for instance, just those guys, Alfred even. So, TJ Leaf's very athletic, great. He's a great offensive player. The main concern is his defense, but when you got a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein there, Scal even, guys who can play defense, it's not as big of a concern. So if you're the Kings, that 10th pick, maybe you go for a guy like TJ Leaf. Maybe go for a guy like Justin Jackson. We'll talk about him later. But, it all depends what you see in the future. These teams have time. They have time to figure out where they want to go in the future, at what position. So if you want to go for a guy like TJ Leaf, he could be your answer in the future at the 4 position. So we'll see.
Yeah. What do you got for us, Ralph?
Well, Aaron was pretty on the money with his analysis, especially with Lauri Markkanen. I think they should go Dennis Smith. Honestly, they should consider going Dennis Smith, but it's only if they think Elfrid Payton is not the answer at point guard. Because Magic, like Aaron said, is a weird team. They have Fournier. They have who else? Aaron Gordon. They have a bunch of pieces that doesn't seem to fit together. And at this sixth spot, you don't know. They can go Dennis Smith, Malik Monk, but they're gonna have to fit that even more, and they already have trouble fitting the team together. And I think Markkanen is the best at that position. And then for number 7, Jonathan Isaac to Minneapolis, or Minnesota, sorry. I think it's a good fit there. It makes a lot of sense, considering he can play the 4 once he reaches his potential. And for New York, Dennis Smith Jr., I think might be one of my favorite players in the draft, only because he's so overlooked by many teams. I mean, if we're just talking pure talent, I think Dennis Smith Jr. could be top 5 in terms of talent in the draft. That's how good he is in my eyes. And for Mavericks, Frank, they love him apparently. I heard that his coach right now for his current team will coach the Mavs in the summer league, so that should say a lot about how much they rave about him. And as Aram said with TJ Leaf, it's a reach. There are some other guys that are better than Leaf at this point, but if you're going to take into consideration team fit, he makes sense, especially with his perimeter shooting next to Willie Cauley-Stein, Labissiere, and De'Aaron Fox, who he can run the pick and roll with.
Yeah. No, I completely agree for the most part. I was looking at Monk a lot for Orlando because I know that really the only guys hitting threes for them were like Fournier, Hazonia a little bit. Finally, when Meeks came back, Meeks was hitting some. But when I looked at it again, they're trying to make Aaron Gordon this stretch 4. I mean, he has the athleticism, but I haven't really seen Gordon shoot well enough to really be considered that dangerous of a stretch 4. So having a guy like Markkanen, I think, could really open things up more for Aaron Gordon. So I think, like, if you're going with the big man route, I think that Markkanen would be the way to go. And then as far as guard-wise, if they wanted to get a guard, I still think Monk would be the one to go with, especially because even though Hazonia is there and even though Fournier is there as well, these are guys that can still they're more of like the positionless guards, and Monk can just fit in anywhere where you need that shooter to be. Especially with Hazonia, I mean, you saw them play him like a decent amount starting out. He wasn't like he would have his couple good games and then would really disappear in other games, and they weren't really playing him all that often. So I'm not even sure, like you guys are saying, like the Magic, they're a weird team because they're not even sure what they're doing with their own players, let alone knowing where they're going with a plan. But yeah, overall, I think Markkanen would be I think it would be the safest pick for them. And then for Minnesota, I mean, I like Isaac. I was also thinking of point guard just because, I mean, I know they have Dunn, but they've been talking about trading guys like Levine and Rubio. I know Rubio said he wants to be on a team that's competing for the playoffs as well, and he said he's going to leave if that's not the case in Minnesota. So I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind, like if I was Minnesota, I wouldn't mind getting a guy like Dennis Smith Jr. just to have him like alongside Dunn, because Dunn seemed to me like he can be a combo guard. Not amazing off the ball, but I think that he could at least be like the reliever of like taking over ball handling, like opportunities and everything. Jonathan Isaac, I do like as well, though, because of the potential next to Karl Anthony Towns. I think that would be a really scary kind of duo that they have, especially with Wiggins in there too. They could have some ridiculously athletic plays. So going on to the Knicks, I really think the Knicks don't get this wrong as long as they take a guard. As long as they take some kind of guard that can handle the ball and distribute the ball, I don't think it's the wrong pick. I think it's very much the wrong pick if they decide to trade Porzingis. I mean, we're already talking about them getting rid of Melo. It's just a matter of time now until Melo finally is gone. And since they have the bad contract of Noah, who I don't think even the Nets would take that bad contract, they kind of have to eat that. So there's not a lot of flex room they can do in free agency. So they're going to have to get most of the guard help from the draft. Dennis Smith would obviously be the perfect one if he's still there. So I love that pick for them at number 8. If he's not there at number 8, I would say go with Ntilikina. So that brings us to the Mavs. And I know our guy BJ in here said, how would Dennis Smith Jr. fit with Dallas? I think he'd fit perfectly fine with Dallas. I don't think there's really any issue with his style of game to be plugged in there. Ntilikina, Aram, you made a great point. I do agree that Ntilikina would benefit a lot having Dirk there, being able to learn from another international guy. Like you can see from other teams that, like Joel Embiid, when he first came in, the Sixers went out and got Mbah Moute to kind of mentor him. You can see a lot of the guys on the Spurs, a lot of the international guys came on very well because of all the international guys they already had on the team with Parker and Ginobili. So I think that would be an amazing learning kind of experience for Ntilikina with the Mavs as well. And then with the Kings, TJ Leaf makes sense to me, especially with the defensive bigs. I mean, especially if they're all gung-ho about Buddy Hield, Monk really makes sense there. So I think TJ Leaf would be the best person to go with at that point in time at number 10. So let's say this. Say the Kings do trade up. So they trade their 5 and 10. And they trade it to, I mean, they talked about trading it to the Lakers. They talked about trading it to the Sixers before that happened. And they talked about trading it with the Suns. Do you guys think the Suns or Lakers would go the same exact way that the Kings go, with De'Aaron Fox at 5 and then TJ Leaf down at number 10? Or do you think they would go a completely different way?
Let me think. So I don't know. Let's just start with the Suns, I guess. So, well, first of all, the Kings I don't think would trade up first, because if unless they're sure, like the Suns would go for De'Aaron Fox, because that was the only reason why they trade up. And we had heard rumors of them not wanting to do 5 and 10 for 3 with the Sixers. So obviously they wouldn't do that sort of deal with the Suns. But the whole point there being, okay, so if they don't want to do it for 3, it's pretty obvious they think De'Aaron Fox is going to fall. Or it's even more obvious that they didn't really want guys like Fultz or Ball. They were more intrigued by Fox. So to answer your question, though, so let's say if the Kings moved up and traded for 4 and got Fox at 4, that's probably what would happen. Then the Kings would get, then the Suns would get Josh Jackson at 5 because he would fall there. They'd either get Josh Jackson or Jason Tatum, whichever one falls at 5. That's who they'd go for. And then 10, we talked about possibly TJ Leaf. If you're the Suns, you don't want TJ Leaf because you got Marquise Chris, and he's your future. And after watching him last year, I'm pretty convinced Chris is their guy. You have if you're the Suns, you no longer have that point guard type guy. So it's an intriguing spot. I think maybe Zach Collins. I think we'll talk about him in a little bit. I think maybe he's the guy at the 5 position because the Suns showed they weren't too keen on Alex Len, but the Phoenix Suns, they got so many young guys. They got Alex Len, they got Dragan Bender, they got Marquise Chris, Devin Booker, TJ Warren, Tyler Ulis even. They got literally young guys at every single position, and it's really up to the Phoenix's front office who they trust most. So I'm assuming Devin Booker is their guy. I'm assuming they're not going to get rid of him. TJ Warren, I'm sure they're a little iffy on because of the injury past. But his nickname's like TJ Bucket. So, he can score. We know that. But then the big guys outside of Chris, do they really trust Len? Do they really trust Bender? Bender only got less than a year under his belt, so we don't really know there. So for those guys, it's hard to say who they'd get at number 10. Maybe Zach Collins, but then again, Zach Collins he might just be another Dragan Bender type where his lack of strength won't let him be able to play in the paint, so he'll have to spread it out to the perimeter where he'll just be a average to below average 3-point shooter. So I think Collins is definitely more skilled in the post than Bender, but we'll see. So yeah, that's probably who Phoenix would go for. Was the other team you mentioned the Lakers, right? If they trade with them? Yeah. So after trading away D'Angelo Russell, I just don't see it whatsoever them trading for 5 and 10 unless 5 and 10 can wield a Paul George type. Unless that could happen, who knows? But let's just play along with this. So if the Lakers traded, because that's really interesting. Because then if the Kings are turning up, would they go Lonzo Ball? Do they like him enough? Because like I said, we know they love De'Aaron Fox. Would they still go De'Aaron Fox too? I don't know. So let's assume they still go De'Aaron Fox at 2. And the Celtics have 3. I don't think they want to go Ball, so they'd probably trade that pick. So then it'd start a huge domino effect. So, and who wants to grab Ball? That's what it'd come down to. But you'd have to assume, again, someone like Tatum or Josh Jackson will fall to 5, where the Lakers had said they love Josh Jackson. So Josh Jackson, I think, would be their guy at 5. And then at 10, if you're the Lakers, let's see, you just got Brooke Lopez, you just traded away D'Angelo Russell. That's hard to tell. Maybe Malik Monk. Maybe you go for a guy like that and you just say, okay, Jordan Clarkson's our point guard. And I don't know. We'll see. But again, if the Lakers were to ever trade for 5 and 10, the only reasoning I could come up with, because if you're trading for 5 and 10, you're trading the top pick for 2 lower picks, that means you're trying to build for the future. And if anything has become clear to me with that trade yesterday of D'Angelo Russell, they are not caring about the future right now. They just want to win now. And yeah, 5 and 10, it wouldn't be ideal for the Lakers, but if they were to do it, they could still probably get a guy like Josh Jackson and then maybe Malik Monk type at 10. We'll see.
Yeah. You're right. But the thought of Jordan Clarkson running point guard is scaring me.
Yeah, definitely.
But like you said, if for example Sacramento takes number 2, They still take De'Aaron Fox because they love his game. Boston wouldn't take Ball, of course, and so that would mean he would fall to the Suns at number 4. Then the Lakers would be left with Tatum or Jackson, like Aaron said, and of course they'd take Josh Jackson based on how many reports saying that they love his game or he's been promised or quote unquote. And for number 10, they could go. Well, they have Brooke Lopez, so maybe you can stretch for Zach Collins and hope that he pans out because I do love Zach Collins' upside, and you can build. I mean, you can develop him while Brooke Lopez spends like 1 year or half a year while he gets dealt. But I don't know. They have a lot of options because there's a lot of variables and a lot of dominoes that they're gonna fall into effect if the Lakers do trade or the Suns trade for number 2, just move up to number 2.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you guys. I think that whole thing would be interesting just because. So say they do go up to Kings go up to number 2. They pick De'Aaron Fox, and then Alonzo Ball comes down to Phoenix. Well, then I think Phoenix definitely starts thinking, hey, we can take Lonzo Ball and trade Eric Bledsoe now. So now they talk about trading Bledsoe, and then Lakers at number 5, like you guys said, they get another guy that they still like in Josh Jackson, and but then let's say maybe the Magic wanted to make, like we were talking about earlier, they weren't trusting Elfrid Payton, and they're the ones who maybe trade for Eric Bledsoe. Like there could be a whole lot of different, like you guys are saying, dominoes falling down in different places. So I just like the prospect of it because it could change up the entire top 5, as well as it may also give the Lakers more picks to trade. If they are trying to win now, they get the 5 and 10. They could package all 4 first-round picks for something to try and swing some kind of trade. So that whole thing would be interesting. But all right, so let's go on here. Let's go to the 11 through 15. So at 11, the Charlotte Hornets, we have taking Malik Monk. At number 12, we have Detroit taking Zach Collins. At 13, we have Denver taking John Collins. At 14, we have Miami selecting Luke Kennard. And then 15, we have the Trailblazers taking Justin Jackson. So, Ralph, you can start this one off. What do you got for us?
All right, so number 11 to the Hornets is Malik Monk. He's such an interesting prospect to me because we know he can score, we know he can shoot. But, as proven in the NBA, you need to be more than just a scorer if you want to be special or a big-time talent in the NBA. Is he going to be able to handle the ball? Is he going to be able to play make for teammates? Those are big question marks for Malik Monk, and that alone could have him slide to out of the top 10, like in our mock draft. But the Hornets, they're interesting because they have a lot of good pieces. Kemba Walker, Nick Batum, and they just traded for Dwight Howard. So they could add another shooter. And that's what Malik Monk is. So I think it's a good fit for Malik Monk. It'd be better for him to slide and go to a team that fits his game rather than he goes early to a team like, let's say, the Magic, and he's just going to be kept in the bench like what they did to Mario Hezonja, for these past couple of years. So I think 11 makes sense. 11 for Malik Monk makes sense. Number 12, Zach Collins. I just mentioned how high I'm on him for his game. Very solid defensive player, stretch 5 potential. He's gonna need to toughen up a little bit, add more muscle, to defend the bigger bigs in the NBA like DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis. But I love his upside. And for the number 13, Denver, John Collins. I love his game. Very, very athletic. I guess he jumps high. Very athletic. and it fits with what the Nuggets are trying to do because every year you see the Nuggets, their motto is running, taking advantage of that altitude they have. So Collins wouldn't be a bad pick here. And for Miami, they take Luke Kennard. We've heard how Kennard is how good Kennard is as a prospect. There was some news of New York trying to pick him at number 8. I don't know if that's going to happen. Talent. I think we posted a stat line of him against top 25 teams this season, where he was averaging 20 plus points. Is that correct?
Yeah.
20 plus points and like 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. So, he's a big time talent. For Justin Jackson, I think he's another scoring wing, and I don't think Evan Turner is their answer there. And Justin Jackson's been improving his scoring and his 3-point shooting, so I think the Blazers will welcome that.
Yeah. So, Aaron, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by saying this. I know, Ralph, you said you're a little concerned Malik Monk might fall. I actually look at it differently. I don't look at it as, oh, no, Malik Monk's fallen. I look at it, oh, man, like, look at all these teams before him. They just don't need a shooting guard. Like, that's just kind of how I see it. Because, like, I was watching the Kentucky Georgia game that was replaying on ESPN2 yesterday, and I'm just watching Malik Monk just go off. De'Aaron Fox wasn't playing in that game, so he had to be aggressive. And when he had to be aggressive, like, you just can't give him any space whatsoever. And if he gets hot, you're done. Because I'm just watching the game, and I'm watching Georgia's defenders get out on him, hand in the face, and they're just flabbergasted when they turn around and it goes in. It's just, his shot is just so beautiful. He's always on target. If he misses, it's going like back rim. It's not like sometimes when you see Lonzo Ball shot where he misses left or right, it's just always on target with Monk because he straightens his body and has perfect release on the shot. And you know what? So that's where it comes down to, as Ralph had pointed out to, there are some concerns with Malik Monk in the sense that he has no ball handling skills and he's 6'3". Who has, I thought in my head, okay, who's really succeeded with that kind of ability? You think of Jared Bayless, but even Jared Bayless could play the point guard position. He could handle the ball. Yes, he was a shooter, and he definitely wasn't as good of a shooter as Malik Monk's probably going to be. But it makes you think, like, who really succeeded at that? Like, you talk about Avery Bradley, but Avery Bradley's like an otherworldly defender. Like, we can't even mention that. I'm not too worried about Malik Monk's defense. He showed that he can play D. Definitely some good perimeter defense, but he struggles going over picks, fighting over picks because he's weak. He's like 185 or whatever it may be, 190. So, that is a concern for him. But yeah, so for Monk, it's just, okay, you have the Kings having 2 picks before, and they have Buddy Hield, who they love. You have Orlando, who has Fournier and Hazonia. So why would they really go for another shooting guard? That's kind of admitting, okay, we failed with the other two. You don't want to say that. Fournier is still 24. Hazonia is, 20 at this point? So, yes, and then you had the Timberwolves, Knicks, before there as well. The Knicks need a point guard more than they need a shooting guard. Like we said before, Monk could fall there, but I think that's just like the better fit. Timberwolves, you have Zach LaVine, you have Wiggins. Why would you go for Monk? And then the Mavs, like we said, Franklin Ntilikina is their guy. So why would they go Monk as well? So, like I said, it's not as much Monk is falling. Oh, no. It's more, okay, Monk is falling. It's just teams just don't need that position right now. I think you're looking at players right now. Monk is a top 5 talent probably in this draft. You got Fultz, Ball, Tatum, and maybe Dennis Smith, and then him, who are top-tier level guys who are ready to jump in and should be able to succeed highly in the specific role. Malik Monk needs playmakers on his team. While I say that, of course, the one game he averaged about 35 points per game in the 2 games that Fox didn't play this year. So that does prove, okay, maybe he doesn't need one. But again, he thrives off of coming off picks, but he needs guys that pass him the ball. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But right now, he's one of the top talents in this draft. If Charlotte can get lucky enough to get him at number 11, that's going to be great. Like Ralph just said, they got Dwight Howard. They have Batum, MKG, and Kemba. Their bench is a little iffy. We'll see. If they can get Monk, that's a fantastic pick. He's a great talent. I can see Monk going 5. I can see him going 11. We'll see where he falls. He's one of those guys where out of I think this draft, it's Fultz, Ball, and then 3 through 11. Top talent right there. And like we said, Monk's probably the one guy where he can go top 5, or he could fall to 11, 12, 13. So we'll see what happens there. 12, Detroit. I know, Ralph, you said you're a big fan of Zach Collins. It's interesting because how valuable these guys are right now. These stretch 5 type who can rebound and block. Brook Lopez can't even rebound, and the Nets got a number 2 pick for him. I thought in my head, okay, if D'Angelo Russell was in this draft, where would he go? With what you've seen now, he'd probably go top 3. He'd go before Fox. He'd be around that ball, pick. He'd probably go 3. Now that I think about it, he would probably go 3. And you are literally trading you're trading Brook Lopez for a top 2 pick. If you can do that, Zach Collins, who has some great potential, can be that type of, the comparison to Brook Lopez. That's not a good comparison, but in the sense that you're a 7-footer who can shoot the ball and who can score, you're very valued apparently in today's NBA. So, Zach, if Detroit can get him at 12, yeah, sure, they just got Ellenson last year, who's shown he can be a very good shooter from Marquette. But then Drummond, he doesn't really fit the system. I know so many people thought he was a top 2 center years back, and now he's kind of fallen out of the top 10 just because of, like I said, how valuable the stretch 5 position is today, and how, so for instance, Jahlil Okafor, he's fallen out of love with the Sixers fans because you just don't need his kind really anymore in the NBA. Just back to the basket guys. Because you have teams like the Warriors who are just going to drain threes, and you need someone to be able to get out on the perimeter. Someone like Zach Collins will be able to do that. Definitely better than Drummond. So we'll see. I'm not sure if he can work with Allenson, a stretch 4 and a stretch 5. So you don't really have anyone to play bully ball in the middle if need be. But we'll see. Number 13, Denver. I'm a huge John Collins fan. I love him. Watching him at Wake Forest, he was excellent at the end of the year. He showed the ability to stretch the floor at times. He does have a very good shot. I know, Ralph, you mentioned his athleticism. I know he was in the gym, I think it was today, and teams were watching him, and teams were just in awe of his ability to dunk the ball and his athleticism. And that's something that scouts will rave about. There's a concern with Collins because he can't play the center. He's, 6'9", around there, 6'10", maybe. But he can't play center. He's strictly a power forward. Definitely won't be a 3. But he's got the hops. He's got the athleticism where he's one of those guys where, for a team like Denver, he might start, but I think he'd be better coming off the bench and just bringing life to that bench unit and just getting all those hustle boards, hustle points. He'll hustle like Kenneth Faried did. No one's like the Manimal in that sense. But he'll get those nitty-gritty boards and nitty-gritty points, and we'll see. Maybe he can carve his way into the starting lineup in the future, and as long as he continues to develop the way he has, he should have no problem with that. 14, Miami Heat, we talked about Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard's a fantastic player. He did so well for Duke, probably their primary ball handler outside of maybe Frank Jackson. Jason Tatum, he was obviously there too. You had all of those guys, yet still Luke Kennard put up some gaudy numbers. And, there is some concern with Kennard because for the most part, he'd have the ball in his hands and he wasn't really a set shooter in college. He was, for the most part, able to take 1 or 2 dribbles and be his player off the dribble and drive to the hole or take a 3-point shot. So it's, it is a little concerning because you didn't see him come off picks and such at Duke. So, that's a little concerning to me, like I said. So, but for a team like the Heat, where you have the ball handler in Dragic, you have ball handler in Tyler Johnson, but then outside of them, your shooting guards and small forwards like Justin Winslow, they don't really slash. They don't slash to the hole. So maybe that Luke Kennard can fit in that sense. I think Kennard's one of those guys. If he fits the right system, he'll be very good in the league. I can't say elite level, but if he does anything compared to what he did in college, he's going to be a great player. And then finally, we talked about Justin Jackson to Portland. He's a great player. There's no doubt about that. He's thin. He doesn't have some weight on him. He needs to gain some weight, I should say, and muscle. And otherwise, he's just going to get bullied. And Justin Jackson's a great shooter. He has a fantastic pivot foot. I've seen him use that solely to get space to hit a jumper. But with Jackson, you're a little concerned. Can he put the ball down and take it to the rack? Is he one of those guys where, okay, let's get him the ball, just go get us a bucket? I don't know. But what's good is that we have him going to Portland, and I think Portland, if he falls this far, it's very possible Justin Jackson goes somewhere like number 10 where Sacramento needs a small forward. But if he falls to like a 15 spot and Portland sees him, that's a very, very good pick for them because you've had guys like Mo Harkless, Al-Farouq Aminu, guys who just, they're wide open. You watch the Blazers game, they put 2-3 guys on Lillard and McCollum when they're touching the ball. You need someone to be able to hit an open jump shot. And Justin Jackson is that guy in this draft. That's the guy who Portland can use to, finally get over the hump of not having someone else who can score the ball. Portland has 3 picks in this first round. Well, that's a team that could package them up and try to move higher if they want to go for a guy like, like maybe even Josh Jackson, like that type, Jason Tatum. Who knows? This is a very interesting draft in that sense because there will be a lot of teams outside of the top 12 that want to move into that top 10, top 11 because this is, like I said before, this is a draft where you have the top 2 picks, then you have 3 through 11 or so that are very good players. And who knows the next time we're going to get this talented of a top-tier draft. You're Portland, maybe you try to jumble up those picks and move up. Otherwise, if Justin Jackson's there, he's definitely your guy.
Yep. And go through the pretty quickly since we're already an hour in and only halfway through. But yeah, so Monk, I think to the Hornets makes perfect sense. I think that you need another shooter on that team, especially to kind of be that outlet guy when you have either Batum or you have Kemba Walker handling the ball. Because they also have Kid Gilchrist, but we all know Kid Gilchrist is not the offensive guy on the team at all. He's that Tony Allen of the team, so he's kind of like you kind of throw him out on offense a little bit. So having another shooter like Monk there, especially with now Howard down there to grab the boards, I mean, even though we talk about Howard being washed up, last season he still averaged like 11 or 12 boards a game. So having that presence under there with another shooter on the outside is huge for them. So then going on to Detroit with Zach Collins, I think that's a solid pick for them, especially if they are thinking of moving Drummond. I think that if they did want to move Drummond, I thought somebody like with somebody who's better in the paint on defense would have been a better choice. Somebody like a Jared Allen. But like Aaron said, the stretch 5, stretch 4 going together, it'd be a little questionable. I don't think it wouldn't work. It would just kind of, you would have to really mess around with the sets and everything to make sure these two guys are equally getting into the offense. I think another guy that would go well with Detroit would actually be Justin Jackson, just because if you have, say, Reggie Jackson at the point, you have KCP at shooting guard if they re-sign him. And right now they have a guy like Marcus Morris who can play either the 3 or the 4. So if you enter in a guy like Justin Jackson, it just gives you another option there to throw in as like a swingman player. And I think he could fit well with those guys, like with Marcus Morris and with alongside KCP, especially since Reggie Jackson isn't the greatest three-point shooter. So then Denver, John Collins, I like this pick for Denver. Like you were saying, he's a hustle guy who, as we saw with Kenneth Faried, those kind of guys can thrive in the type of system that Denver is continuing to play, especially when you have Murray and you have Jokic and those guys around you. An athletic player is going to thrive with them because they're going to find you open more often than not, especially a guy like Jokic. If you have an extremely athletic player in John Collins making cuts and slashes toward the basket, and you have Jokic in the post, those alley-oops, those little bounce passes, backdoor passes, those are going to be deadly. And, I mean, that would be an offense that would be really fun to watch. And then for Miami, I think Kennard would be a great pick for them, especially when you have guys up and coming like Justice Winslow. You have Whiteside there. Dragic and Tyler Johnson are there. Dion Waiters. Waiters Island is still down in Miami, so, I mean, fun time. And then, of course, Portland. We have Justin Jackson going there. And I think he would fit in perfectly with them, especially with their core McCollum and now Nurkic in at the center, who, I mean, they seem to play really well when Nurkic was in there. So adding a guy like Justin Jackson would be perfect for them. So, yeah, let's just move on to the next 5 here just for time purposes. So we have Chicago at 16, taking Jawan Evans. We have the Milwaukee Bucks at 17, taking Donovan Mitchell. We have the Pacers at 18, taking OG Anunoby. We have at 19, the Atlanta Hawks taking Harry Giles. And Portland at number 20, taking Jarrett Allen. So, one off.
All right. So we'll start with Chicago at 16, and this is probably, out of all of our picks, this is probably one of the more surprising ones because Jawan Evans is a guy that a lot of people think will be in that second round, early second round, mid-second round range, maybe late first round, but most have early second. But when we look at Jawan Evans and what he did at Oklahoma State, there's no denying his talent, his ability, and we heard the Chris Paul comparisons. If you watch some tape from Chris Paul at Wake Forest, you can see some of the similarities. Jawan Evans has a great crossover, can score the ball. He's like a little mini Dennis Smith Jr. in that he was the do-it-all guy at Oklahoma State, but, more defensive and not as talented offensively than Dennis Smith. When you're Chicago, and you're sitting there at 16 and you just got Valentine, who knows what's going to happen with Butler. Butler says he wants to stay. You got to wait for another year. I don't know. We'll see what they want to do, but what makes the most sense is that point guard position is vacant pretty much. You got Mike Carter-Williams, Jerry Grant. It's an odd time. We'll see who they go with. Jawan Evans is who we decide to say. And like I said, he's a very talented point guard, and they would love him there. And some people say, okay, well, they have Jerry Grant. Why are you giving up on him so quickly? There's a huge difference between the talent of Jerry Grant and the talent of Jawan Evans and the potential, more specifically. Because Evans could be a top-tier point guard in the draft in the league one day, but Jerry Grant doesn't really have that potential. We thought about Edmund Sumner here, point guard from Xavier. He played a little off ball there, but Sumner's injury really hampered his chances of going lottery, and ultimately Evans is more of the scorer type, and coupled with his playmaking ability and defensive ability, I think Evans is definitely the guy Chicago should go for there, even if it is early. Milwaukee at 17. Donovan Mitchell is who we said. It's an intriguing team. Just like, not like Orlando, but in that sense, a lot of assets. Much better assets than Orlando, but they got guys like Giannis, Jabari Parker, Malcolm Brogdon, Chris Middleton, Thon Maker. They're starting five right there. So what's going to happen next season? How confident are they Malcolm Brogdon is their point guard for the future? At the time when Malcolm Brogdon was drafted, that was probably one of the ones that all of us missed out on, really. We said, is he a 2? Is he a 3? What's he going to do? He can definitely post up smaller guards, and he can handle the ball pretty well, but he's probably just a defensive 2 guard who makes his way as a backup. That's what I had thought, at least. And then when we see him playing point guard for Milwaukee, I never saw that coming. We were debating, too, is he a shooting guard or small forward? Ends up being a point guard. Not sure where that came from, but it definitely worked out. Made the playoffs, played pretty well against Toronto in that first round. So, that's, again, Milwaukee's a team where you don't know where they're going to go. A guy like Donovan Mitchell can definitely help their bench, showed he could shoot the 3 ball, defended extremely well at Louisville, has that Avery Bradley type where he is defensive-minded first, but that can hit the 3-point shot. He struggled at times. He was a little inefficient in certain games. You don't like that, like 3 for 10 shooting in certain games, but he's a guy where even if his offense isn't going, he's going to supply it on the defensive end. So Milwaukee, that shouldn't be a bad pick at all for them at 17. Pacers 18, OG Anunoby. He's one of those guys, again, just like Sumner, his stock fell because he got hurt at Indiana, tore his ACL, and ended his season abruptly. And we forget he was a top 10 guy early on before that injury. He was immediately getting high love from scouts and from personnel in the front offices, and people loved his defensive intensity and ability to score. He's definitely not offensive minded. He's a defensive first guy, but he has that ability to hit the open shot. Everyone remembers him for the short shorts that he wore, like when he was at Indiana, but he's so much more than that. He's a great talent that a team where if you get him outside of the lottery, it's very possible that he's going to fall to you. That's one problem we all have. A lot of people, I'm sure some people watching now, think to themselves, okay, I'm going to look through past drafts. I'm going to look through all these mock drafts, right? I'm going to look through all these mock drafts, and I'll get a good understanding of where guys will go. And that's why maybe if you saw a Jawan Evans pick, you're like, whoa, that's way too early. People don't understand. NBA teams don't go off of mock drafts. They don't go off of Draft Express or NBA Draft and that. While they're very, professional and they're a great source for fans, it's not what NBA personnel go after. So who knows? OG Anunoby
doing that, but that's
that's very possible. But OG Anunoby's a guy where he could be top 10 on someone else's list. We don't know. We have no idea right now. So we'll see in exactly where he falls. He's another guy, like we had mentioned before, where he could jump. He could be late lottery, early post-lottery, or maybe even fall to the second round because of that injury. But many of us at Basketball Society, I know you guys can attest to this, his defense is spot on, and he'd be a great guy, especially if you're the Pacers. We're assuming here, if they get rid of Paul George, even if they don't, you need a small forward for the future because he has made it clear that he's not going to be there for the long term. And OG's, he's a big guy. He's a semi-Ojale type, if you know him better than OG, because if you saw him at SMU in the tournament. So he's that type, even better defensively. and could guard probably 2s, 3s, and 4s in the future. He probably has a Justice Winslow type defensive impact when he comes into the league. That's why I would say that's the best way I would put it. Offensively, like I said, even I'm a little unsure what's going to happen there. Is he going to be able to hit open shots? We don't know yet. So in Indiana, though, it could be a very good opportunity where if they trade Paul George, they're probably not going to be a great team. They'll have like a Miles Turner type. I guess they'll have Lane Stevenson running the point. Not sure if that would work out very well, but yeah. So, and then 19, Harry Giles. This is pretty obvious to me. If you're Atlanta and you just got rid of Paul Millsap, but assuming they do a sign and trade because we've heard them talk about that, and you just got rid of Dwight Howard, you don't know where the team's going. You got Schroeder, you got Bazemore, but who else do you really have? You go for the best talent, I would say. And if you take away injuries, Harry Giles is definitely the best talent left. And obviously injuries is the big thing for him. At Duke, we rarely saw him because he was injured most of the time. And even when he played maybe 20-plus minutes in 2 games, I think it was. Something like that. He barely played starter minutes at all. And that's a huge concern for a team that's going to draft him. But if you're Atlanta and you're beginning your rebuild, that's not a bad pick to go with because it's the 19th pick and there's no reason – you're not really risking much. Like I said many times, the lottery is good here. There's some very good talent in the first round, and it's a talented draft. But a lot of these guys are high potential. So – you don't know what you're getting. And for the guys that you do know what you're getting, for a team like Atlanta, there's no reason to go after them. There's no reason right now. Because if you're not trying to win, if you don't retain Paul Millsap, you don't get top-tier talent, just build a young core and see where Harry Giles can take it. Because Harry Giles was, ESPN, he was the top guy coming out of high school?
He was
One
the
or
top
two?
guy.
Yeah, he was the top guy. And people forget that. He has not been talked about whatsoever pretty much leading up to this draft. So Harry Giles is a guy where, I don't even know if he'll fall to 19 given his talent, but he's definitely a guy who has the capability. And then finally at 20, Portland could go for Jared Allen, this guy we talked about. I know, Alex, you had mentioned Nurkic. He's still there. So Portland, is it smart to go for a guy like Jared Allen when you have Nurkic, you got McCollum and Lillard, and you just got Justin Jackson? So it is an odd situation they're in because you don't really know where they're going to go. But like I said, they have 3 first-round picks. So you could go for a guy like Jared Allen, who is very defensive-minded, good rim protector, and he's one of the longest guys you'll get. It's intriguing because the defensive centers you're getting in this draft, most of the centers are not big. You're not really seeing 7-foot centers in this draft. Ani Bogu, Bam Adebayo, Jared Allen, maybe outside Zach Collins because he's a 7-footer. All these guys are 6'10". And that is a concern. That is small for a center in the NBA. So, and Jared Allen, he doesn't have a good enough shot to be a stretch 4, so he'll have to be a defensive center like that Tristan Thompson type. And while we think, maybe he's not that valuable, if you look at the Warriors and you look at the Cavaliers, the 2 teams in the championship, like I said, Tristan Thompson's one that started for the Cavs, the one that started for the Warriors is also Pachulia. So, while the center position isn't too valuable for these top-tier teams, they do need a guy who will go in there, play defense, and rebound. And Jared Allen is that type of guy.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna skip some picks, but like Aram said, number 16, Jawan Evans seems like a reach. Given how talented the draft is, but Chicago desperately needs a point guard. Unless Michael Carter Williams is a point guard. I'm guessing he's not. But Jawan Evans is a big time talent. His one game in the March Madness this year, he had 23 points, 12 assists, and 7 rebounds, if I'm not mistaken. His team lost, but that's a big time stat line. And he can show that, like Aaron said, he has Chris Paul similarities. I'm not I'm not going to say he's going to be as good, but the similarities are there. And skipping over to the 19th pick with Atlanta, Harry Giles. If I was a GM of a late lottery pick, like let's say the Nuggets, I would honestly consider drafting Harry Giles because although he's been injured, I think he tore his ACL twice or something like that. In high school, he's still an incredible talent. I argued for Dennis Smith to be a top 5 talent in this draft, and I would say Harry Giles is top 10 in my eyes. He's very talented. If you look back at his high school tapes, he was just a do it all kind of guy, and it's sad that he was injured and didn't get enough chances to play at Duke. That caused his stock to drop a little bit. But in terms of talent, he's up there, top 10. And for 20, Jared Allen, he could. They do have Nurkic, but like Aaron said, you're gonna need centers who are gonna protect the rim. Tristan Thompson, for example, maybe even JaVale McGee. They were important were important for their team. And if the Blazers are gonna start contending, with Mother McCullough, they're gonna need a good protector like Jared Allen.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, for the most part, I agree with a couple of the points here. So Juwan Evans, I like that pick for Chicago. The only other pick I would even look at for Chicago would be Donovan Mitchell, because like we're saying, they need a point guard. I mean, right now they have Rondo, but he's probably not going to be there for long. They have Michael Carter Williams. They have Jerry and Grant. And they traded OKC for Payne. So they have a lot of these guys that we all thought potentially were going to be decent point guards and haven't panned out. Well, except for Rondo, he's just getting on the older side. But so they need a guy who can run the team, run the show, as well as go get him a bucket. So I think that Juwan Evans would be a great selection for them at this point. I just want to touch on the Bucks real quick. Since they already have a lot of young guys at every spot, I don't think that they could go wrong with their pick. I think they just have to take literally the best player available, no matter what position they are, because no matter what, this person that they're going to get is most likely going to be coming off the bench. With a core team of, Brogdon, Middleton, Parker, Antetokounmpo, and then really any three of the centers you throw in there, and which is probably going to be Thon Maker. The pick of Donovan Mitchell would be nice, so that at that point you can throw Donovan Mitchell in there as the backup, maybe so you could give Dellavedova less time, although they did just pay him a lot of money. But I would probably rather have Donovan Mitchell at this point. And then I want to move down to, after that, the Hawks. I completely agree with Harry Giles. He could be one of those guys that, I mean, I want to quote a genius of our time. You have to have the longest view in the room. You got with the Hawks, these guys are going to, like Aaron said, they're going to start the rebuild now. Like they're looking into the sign and trade of Millsap. They got rid of Dwight Howard. They traded Korver earlier this season to Cleveland. So they've gotten rid of almost all of the pieces already. Like they've already lost Horford last offseason. They've lost all these pieces from that random 1 seed team they had a few years ago. So now it's pretty much what they've shown us is that this is Schroeder's team. This is his team, and they're starting to build around him now because they're getting rid of everybody else. And so you need somebody to go along with him, Bazemore, and Hardaway Jr. and those guys that are coming up now. So I think it's perfect. It would be a perfect gamble for Giles. If he pans out, that's amazing. You got him at 19. If he doesn't pan out, all right, you're probably going to get a better pick next year anyway because you're starting the rebuild now. And then Portland with Jared Allen, I think it is a good pick, especially because one thing we didn't talk about, Portland has Festus Ezeli, which was supposed to be Golden State's defensive guy, and he was a big part of why they won their first ring, like behind Bogut. But even with Ezeli there, he's had a lot of injury issues recently. So I think, getting a guy like Jared Allen just as some insurance is a really good move, especially down at number 20. And like you guys said, they have 3 first-round picks, so they can afford to get some insurance guys as well. All right, so moving on to the next 5 here. We got OKC at 21. We have them taking Frank Jackson. The Brooklyn Nets at 22. We have them taking Caleb Swanigan. The Raptors at 23. We have them taking Justin Patton. 24 Jazz, we have them taking Sindarius Thornwell. And the Magic at 25, we have them taking Bam Adebayo. So, Ralph, what do you got for us with these 5?
All right, so we'll skip over to the Nets with Caleb Swanigan. He was an 18 and 12 guy in his sophomore year, if I'm not mistaken. That how many guys have averaged that in the draft? In terms, if we're gonna base of the college season, I think he'd go higher. But I think 22 to the Nets sounds ideal. And then moving on to the Raptors, 23, they take Justin Patton. You've seen in the previous playoffs how Valanciunas just struggled staying on the court because the Bucks were just running, and he didn't have much use for Toronto. And they need a mobile center. They need someone who can run, and that's exactly what Justin Patton is. So I think that's a great pick. Number 24 to the Jazz, and there is Thornwell. If you watched March Madness closely, you've seen how explosive of a scorer he is, and how he was their best player, in that incredible run they had. So the Jazz could use someone like that, just as a backup in case you lose a scorer like Gordon Hayward in free agency. 5, Bam Adebayo. I think one of our guys in Basketball Society, we made a scouting report on Bam Adebayo, and they were talking about how he could be a Dwight Howard kind of player. A little undersized, but very a very tenacious rebounder, and he'd be falling to the Magic, and maybe they could get their baby Dwight Howard, with the 25th pick.
What do you got for us, Aaron?
Yeah, so I'll mention the OKC drafting Frank Jackson because I know Rafi skipped over them. So obviously, if you're OKC, you got one guy, you got Russell Westbrook that you're focusing on, right? So you need, when he's out, or he's barely out, he's probably playing like 40+ minutes per game. So when he doesn't have the ball, you need someone else to be able to score, handle the ball, and attack the basket. And Frank Jackson is that type of guy. At Duke, he did such a great job of leading the team with Luke Kennard and Jason Tatum alongside him. And, he showed the ability to play defense and be a guy where he's not the primary scorer, but score at times and score on a catch and shoot type play. So when you have a guy like Russell Westbrook there, where his whole ability, what's so great with him is that when he attacks the basket, you got 2-3 guys jumping at him. And what you need is guys to hit the open shot. At this position in the draft, when you're 21, my ideal pick here would have been like a Luke Kennard type, even though, like I said, I had concerns about his catch and shoot ability. Still, that great shooting touch, that's what you want here to be able to develop it, someone who can hit the open shot. I think Frank Jackson already plays like a veteran. He's still raw. He's not a veteran in the sense that, okay, he's a complete player, but a veteran in the sense that he knows what to do. He makes a smart play. He doesn't make bad turnovers. He'll attack the basket if need be. I know we saw at the draft combine. So out of players going into this draft, he had the best vertical because the only other guy who had a better vertical was Hamidou Diallo, who decided to return to college because he hadn't played a game yet. So Frank Jackson had the best vertical out of everyone in this current draft, which is pretty astounding for a guy of his size. So, Frank Jackson's athletic, is smart, good playmaker, and should fit fine in that Thunder backcourt. Will he start? I don't think he'll start right away. I think he's the guy who could end up playing the point guard position for OKC. If you wanted to say, okay, Russ is our shooting guard, like he could. I mean, the NBA now is like positions. Positions don't really matter. There are guards, forwards, and then like there's guards and forwards pretty much. So that's all you got, as we see in the All-Star game, because that's how they're voted. But so you could end up having Frank Jackson and Russell Westbrook as your backcourt. We'll see if that ends up working. Frank Jackson's going to have to prove he's a knockdown three-point shooter. I think he can end up being a very good shooter and make a solid impact in his rookie season and in years going forward. But he's got the potential to be a solid player for OKC. Going forward for the Nets, I know you mentioned Bits. I'll just rarely mention Caleb Swanigan. I had loved this pick for Brooklyn when they had Brook Lopez. The pick made so much sense for me because you got Brook and you got Caleb. Both guys can play bully ball in the paint and shoot it from the outside. They're not really stretch 4s and 5s because they can also rebound and shoot the ball, but and Swanigan would have been a perfect complement to Brook because he can actually rebound. And as he showed at Purdue. And what's kind of hard for a guy like Caleb is that at Purdue, he's not going up against guys of his size, so he's able to get so much space and bully people in the paint because no one can keep up with him in college. So it's a little hard evaluating him and how he'll do in the NBA, but he's a fine talent. So, and then moving on to the Raptors, I saw a lot of Creighton games last year going to Seton Hall, and there was one thing I always saw from Justin Patton, and he was always the first one down the floor. Always the first one down the other end. Because he'd always leak out if someone else gets a rebound. And you love that as a coach. You love your centers sprinting down the court. One huge problem with DeMarcus Cousins on the Kings was that every time, let's just say when Darren Collison was there, DeMarcus Cousins wouldn't pass the three-point line until 15 seconds were left on the shot clock. That's 9 seconds you're wasting. You're not getting any transition buckets if that's what's happening. Justin Patton helped Creighton get countless transition buckets every single game because of his effort, because of his motor. That's what he did for that team. And I think he can do that for a team like Toronto, where Ralph mentioned Jonas Valanciunas has proven that he's not really their future. He's not their guy because he never shows up in the playoff time. And that's a huge concern. And then 24, we talked about Utah Jazz. Sindarius Thornwell, I know we had said this earlier. We had posted this on Twitter. And please follow us if you don't, because put up some great stats on these college players. And one of these stats for Sindarius Thornwell, he had an offensive box plus minus of above 9 and defensive box plus minus above 6. Last player to do that in college was Victor Oladipo like 3 or 4 years ago. And those are the only 2 guys that have done that in the last decade. And that's fantastic. That's a perfect stat for Sindarius, showing he can do it on both ends. And he's one of those guys, I had mentioned earlier, so far, everyone leading up to now, you're a little iffy on. You're like, I don't know if he's going to be that guy that we think he's going to be. Sindarius is going to be that guy. You know what you're getting with him. Solid defender, could probably even start right now and hit open jumpers and attack the basket with the best of them because he looks like a complete player when you just watched him at South Carolina. He looked really good. So, is Sindarius going to be that next great guy in the NBA? I don't know about that, but he's definitely a guy for Utah, especially if you lose Gordon Hayward, like Ralph had said. Sindarius is your guy. He can fit right into that small forward position. 25, finally, Bam Adebayo. This is the biggest concern because we had talked about before how, when I look at that Dwight Howard deal, I mentioned it, that honestly, when I look at it, I would have said, oh, yeah, the Hornets fleeced them, right? But maybe that's just what centers are today. Centers who can't spread the floor. That's kind of what Bam does for you right now. He's a 6'9", undersized center, right? Maybe he can be a power forward. It's hard to tell right now, but that's why he's falling so far. If you watched him at Kentucky, you would see he's a good perimeter defender. Like, he can get out on guards and defend them very well. I remember seeing a play when they played UCLA, and he was defending Lonzo Ball very well. Ball still hit the shot because, I mean, he's just hard to guard. He's a hard player to guard, especially for big men. But, you know, Bam is just, you know, he showed that he can do that. He can get out on the perimeter and defend. So, yes, he's a little undersized, but if you're the Magic and you find him at 25, if there's any chance he could be a mini Dwight, as you had said, Ralph, go for it. Why not?
Right. Yeah. And so I'll just touch on the Bam Adebayo first, since that's what we're talking about right now. I think that having that kind of guy who can bang down low is going to do wonders for Magic in the rebounds category, because now you have an athletic guy in Aaron Gordon. You would have Adebayo, and you would be able to not just dominate the boards just through pure strength, but just because you have guys who are going to out-jump other teams, and that's just big for them. So, like you said, if that's like the potential to be like a baby Dwight, I mean, you might as well go for it, especially all the way down at 25. Like that's not a huge risk. It's a well calculated one. So going back up to, I want to go to the Nets with Caleb Swanigan. One of our ex Basketball Society guys, Mike Hess, he's a huge Purdue fan, and Caleb Swanigan since day one. So I mean, like, I've talked to him about it because, you know, I don't meet many Purdue fans that live in Pennsylvania. So we talked about it, and the more I heard it from him and the more I watched some games, the more I liked Caleb Swanigan's game. And I think he is a wonderful pick for Brooklyn. I think he is a perfect guy to, you know, when you're the Brooklyn who is struggling to really find the guys. You're getting a lot of the bottom of the barrel guys because of that trade with Boston. I think Caleb Swanigan is kind of like a diamond in the rough, especially down there in the 20s where you would get him. And especially now that you get rid of Brook Lopez as well, I think that it's kind of a no-brainer to go and get Caleb Swanigan there. So then with the Raptors, I have gone on countless podcasts and said I don't like Valanciunas. I don't think he doesn't threaten any team ever. I mean, like, you put him up against like the Sixers, and I believe Sims like put 20 on his head one time. Sims of all people. So
it's insanity, man.
I don't see Valanciunas really scaring anybody. He'll have a random game of like 20 points, 15 rebounds, but they're so few and far between that it's just like it's not exactly worth it. So I do like the pick of Justin Patton as well, because especially with today's NBA, go more athletic centers. We're going with guys who can run the floor, who can catch the lobs, who can do all of that. In, you know, like Ralph said before, JaVale McGee played a big part for the Warriors. Tristan Thompson is a guy who's running back and forth and catching lobs. A lot of people love Nerlens Noel for that fact. Even Joel Embiid is getting up and down the floor catching lobs. There's a lot of guys out there, centers out there, that the athleticism and their ability to get up and down the floor is what makes them valuable. So I think that he could be of great value to them, especially with a guy like Ibaka next to him. I think that those two together could really do well, especially in transition. And then the other one that I wanted to touch on was Thornwell. I really love Thornwell's game. I love his footwork. His footwork is amazing to me. There's a lot of times where I watched him where he would go high post, low post, even in the baseline towards the corner. And his footwork was the reason he got himself open and got himself a bucket. And with a team like the Jazz, who are really technically sound, and a team that you're going to find open spots with guys passing you the ball like Diaw, George Hill, Gordon Hayward if he's still there, and so on and so forth. I think he could greatly and fit very well into that system. And then even then, if the Jazz, because they've been talking about trading Favors. So say they trade Favors. I mean, if you really want to go for a small ball lineup, if you have a guy like Thornwell who can do well in the post due to his footwork, a small lineup, then it might be able to work for you. But yeah, so let's go on to our final 5 picks here of the first round. So we have the Blazers at 26 taking Josh Hart. We have the Lakers at 27 taking Dwayne Bacon. We have the Lakers again at 28 taking Tony Bradley. The Spurs at 29 taking Kyle Kuzma. And the Jazz again at 30 taking Wesley Iwundu. What you got for us, man?
So yeah, starting at 26, the Blazers, Josh Hart. It's one of those guys, we haven't really talked about much. We haven't talked about how good he is. And in NBA drafts today, how scouting has changed. We've seen this shift from talent to potential. And Josh Hart is one of the most talented guys, probably one of the best, arguably the best player in college basketball last season. The best player in college basketball the last 2 years, arguably, of course. And you look at this draft, and outside of Sindarius and Josh Hart, there aren't many upperclassmen that you see going in the first round. Just period. You don't see them going. So, if you're the Blazers and you get 3 picks in the first round, you keep all of them. You go for 2 younger guys, like we had mentioned before, and then you go for a third one who's established, who you know is going to do something for your team. Let's just say, who knows what's going to happen in free agency? If for some reason Portland can bring Gordon Hayward in, you want a guy like Josh Hart, someone who can do something off the bench, who come playoff time can actually score whenever he comes in for Portland. That's the guy who, if he's still there at 26, he's one of those guys who we're actually higher on than a lot of people. A lot of people are saying mid-second round, late second round, maybe mid to late second round for Josh Hart. We really like his game. There's no doubt in his talent. Go for a guy like him, even if he's a little older, even if he's got 2 or 3 years on these guys. If you're an established team who's made the playoffs like Portland, and you're not ready to deal Lillard and McCollum, and their timetables now, we've had a lot of discussion on this. They're getting really good right now. Maybe you go for a guy like Josh Hart, who can fit that system, can come off the bench and actually score a good amount of points for your team. But you need bench scoring. That's what Portland needs. It needs scoring outside of those top 2 guys. After the Blazers, I'll just talk about it in a bunch. The Lakers, we have Dwayne Bacon and Tony Bradley. Dwayne Bacon at Florida State, I mentioned before when we were talking about Jonathan Isaac, fantastic scorer, one of the best 2 guards in the game, and his ability to score the ball is uncomparable to many guys in this draft. And when you're the Lakers and you have Jordan Clarkson, this is a little tough because you just got rid of D'Lo, and now we're kind of flustered. What's going to happen? Are they going to go ball? If they go ball, are you set on Clarkson being the 2 guard? Or are you going to deal with Clarkson? Are you going to get Paul George? Who's going to come with Paul George? We don't really know with everything right now. But Dwayne Bacon could be a very solid guy to come off the bench and be their 6th man. Nick Young's still there, but is he really going to be there long term? No, I don't think so. I think Bacon will be the guy you move Young aside for. And then after that, Tony Bradley, he's a guy at UNC who didn't get much time because he was behind Kennedy Meeks. He was another one of those. He's long. He's got NBA level size, and he could make it in the league just because he looks good. And, you know, in the short time that he played, yeah, he did pretty well. He was a solid rim protector, but for him, it's all about potential. Right now, we don't really know where he'd fit. If you're a team like the Lakers, you could get Bradley and slide behind Brook Lopez to learn from him. So if this whole trading D'Angelo Russell thing doesn't pan out, you have Tony Bradley in a couple of years, after a couple of years of experience with learning under Brook Lopez, and maybe in 2-3 years, where I think he's still 2-3 years out, I think in that time frame, Tony Bradley could be a good addition. After that, you know, this is my guy San Antonio picking Kyle Kuzma. I know he's probably the biggest question mark going into this draft, because before the NBA draft combine, Kyle Kuzma from Utah, everyone saw him at Utah and wasn't really sure about him. You know, it's like, is this shot really that good? He's got great size. It's like 6'10" and long. You know, he's not an excellent rebounder, not an excellent defender. He's average at all of this. So is he really draftable? A lot of people said no. A lot of people and then some others had him late second round. And then out of nowhere, Kyle Kuzma comes to the NBA draft combine and just shows up, just shows out. With a bunch of scouts there, he was absolutely amazing in scrimmages. Couldn't miss a three. Was just knocked down from deep three-point range, behind the NBA three-point arc. And teams were just astounded by it. The scouts were beyond confused at where was this in Utah, you know. And some people say, those against Kuzma say, you know what, I don't know, it was just one draft combine, but he did it in multiple days, and he showed that he's got that shot. He did it against college talent. He did it against guys who were going to make the NBA. So with Kyle Kuzma, San Antonio is one of those teams who always seems to pick out that player. You know, I know we haven't mentioned him yet. Ivan Rabb's a guy, you know, we haven't he's in that end of lottery range where we're not too keen on him. He was very highly touted last year, but he's a guy that we left out of our first round, but he could go to 29 San Antonio as well. They're a team, like I had said, that usually picks out that guy who turns out to be something pretty good, or a drafted stash type player. Kuzma is one of those is a player who can come into San Antonio, and I truly believe can come off the bench and hit shots as a backup stretch four. So we'll see with that. And then finally, with the Utah Jazz, Wesley Iwundu. You know what? I've watched a lot of Kansas State basketball. I know a lot of people haven't said that since Michael Beasley played, but for some reason I've seen a lot of Kansas State basketball. And Wesley Iwundu is their guy. You know, they have DJ Johnson at the big. You got Wade, Dean Wade, I think his name is at power forward. And it all stems from Wesley. He's the guy who, and I think Barry Brown or Bruce Brown, Barry Brown is there as well at the shooting guard position. And Wesley is, you know, he's the guy who, he's listed as a small forward. A lot of people have him listed as small forward, but he played point guard for most of the time at Kansas State. He was like a 6'5", 6'6" point guard. And his first year, the big concern was, listen, he's long, he's talented, he can rebound, he can start the fast break, run the transition, but he can't shoot. And this past year, he showed us he actually has a fine mid-range jumper. He completely switched up his form, and it looks a lot better now. If you haven't seen Wesley Iwundu, go check him out. He's the guy who, you know, if you're the Utah Jazz, and let's just say you lose George Hill, you lose Gordon Hayward, who knows, maybe you lose Favors, like you said, Alex. Iwundu is a guy who, he can fall there, and if he falls to 30, which he should very well be there, it's not a bad pick if you're beginning to rebuild your team. Now, Utah, I don't think, given how good they were last year, they'll never be a full rebuild type team, but if you lose one or two pieces, Wesley's the guy who'd come in, because, you know, if you see our mock draft just off of from the article we'll end up publishing, you'll see Sindarius Thornwell, small forward, Wesley Iwundu, small forward, 2 picks by the Utah Jazz. Don't get mistaken, though. Wesley's not a true small forward. He'll be playing 2 or the 1 at times for Utah, And he should be a very solid addition to that team if they go that
Yeah,
route.
I like it. I like it. Ralph, what do you got?
All right, so we talked about Josh Hart, how he's actually very overlooked. No one's really talking about him this season. And just to point out his numbers, he averaged 18.7 points a game, 6.4 rebounds on 51% field goal shooting, 40% from deep, and 75% from the free throw line. I mean, that's very efficient numbers for a college player. And just like Aram alluded to, he was probably one of the best, I mean, the best college player in the nation over the past 2 years. And, he could fall within this range. He should be very well falling within this range. And he's such a crappy competitor, and you're gonna need those kinds of players, in the league. We've seen Tony Allen. I'm not comparing them to, but you're gonna need those kind of scrappy players, and that's what Josh Hart is. And then as for the Lakers, Dwayne Bacon, Tony Bradley, Aram just described them perfectly, but I'm not gonna put much stock into that because I'm assuming they're gonna do something with Paul George with these picks. So I don't think these guys are gonna be with the Lakers, in my opinion. I think they're gonna trade. But moving on to the Spurs, Kyle Kuzma, not many people heard of him, until he started showing out at the combine, where I think at one point in one scrimmage he had 17 points by some period. And, people were being surprised. And, I was reading through some draft rumors a while ago, and they said that Kyle Kuzma was actually promised in the top 40 range. So 29, he should definitely be there for the Spurs. And how the Spurs are always getting lucky at drafts, finding like those unheard of players that could or have the potential to make an impact in the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kyle Kuzma would be a great pickup for the Spurs. Like you guys are saying, they just happen to find that diamond in the rough all the time. I really like Josh Hart with the Blazers, especially just because he's like a do-it-all kind of guy. So him coming in to relieve McCollum, relieve Lillard, I think he would be a perfect guy coming in off the bench. They do have Evan Turner right now, who kind of is supposed to be that do-it-all kind of guy for them as well. But I think Hart is still a perfect fit for that. I mean, you can't have enough guys that do it all. So that will always be a great pickup. Like Ralph said, with the Lakers picks at 27, 28, I do like the Dwayne Bacon and Tony Bradley pickups, but at the same time, I'm not putting much into these two picks. Like Ralph said, I think this is going to be in some sort of trade. But like we were talking about earlier, we thought that the Lakers were looking ahead towards the future. We thought that they were getting a young core ready to start competing after like LeBron and things like that, getting with that timeline like we talked about. But now that whole thing is kind of switched up with the D'Lo trade, they have to try and find guys who are NBA ready as soon as possible because they pretty much have said, hey, we're getting Paul George, and I mean, there's the whole rumor about them trying to go for LeBron. So if you're gearing up to get these guys, you're going to have to start getting guys who are NBA ready now because you're deciding you're going to compete very much sooner rather than later. And I said the Kyle Kuzma one. The Wesley one for the Jazz, I think, is a solid pick as well. I think Rab would also be a solid pick for them, especially if they're going to get rid of Favors, if they're going to let him walk. I think Rab would be a decent pick there. Even as a backup to Gobert, I think Rab would, fill in the void of Favors. I mean, obviously, I don't think that Rab will have the kind of polished game that Favors had, that filling the void of favors, inside game is going to be hard. But I think you do have to try and address that at some point. So I think Rab would also be a solid pick there. So to wrap things up, give me your top 2 guys that you think in the second round could turn out to be, the next Draymond, the next Isaiah Thomas, whoever it may be. Whichever one of you guys wants to start that, go for it.
Go ahead, Ralph.
All right. Actually, I'm surprised that we didn't have him in the first round, but Semi Ojeleye from SMU. I love his game so much. Big body guy, elite defensive guy. I think he could be that kind of Draymond kind of guy. If I'm not sure he's gonna pan out like Draymond, but he has that kind of game. And the other one, I'm actually very high on Ike Anigbogu. He's very raw, but so much potential. With his 7'6" wingspan, if I'm not mistaken. He can catch lobs, rebound, protect the rim. He has like the Bismack Biyombo kind of game. You know what Bismack did last year with his playoff run. I think Anigbogu has that kind of potential.
Yeah. Okay. So two of my guys, I know Ivan Rad. We had mentioned before, so I won't mention him. He's definitely out there because he's top tier guy who we just don't think will go in the first round. But one of my guys, probably the guy I'm biggest on, is Tyler Dorsey. Tyler Dorsey is shooting guard from Oregon who had an exceptional NCAA tournament and is just a knockdown shooter. I think he's one of those guys in the second round, especially in this kind of draft. This is a point guard draft, top tier point guard draft, and then solid average to above average potential power forwards. So we talk about Rab, Adebayo, Leaf, Marcano, like all of those guys. Those are solid power forwards potential wise. But then we don't have these many shooters, these knockdown shooters. We're talking about Kennard, obviously Malik Monk's on the top of that list, Donovan Mitchell, but who else is there? And for me, it's Tyler Dorsey. Whatever team has a second round pick, honestly, even if I had a late first round pick, I might go for Tyler Dorsey. I think he's your guy in the second round that if you're, he'll probably fall to that 40, late 30s range. But Tyler Dorsey is a knockdown shooter who can come off a bench in the NBA and end up being a very good, maybe 38% in the league, I think, and can just light it up for your team. Another guy, PJ Dozier from South Carolina. He's one of the more intriguing ones because he played alongside Darius Thornwell, so you don't really know what his capabilities are. And in the short span of those 5-6 games where Sindarius was suspended, where PJ Dozier got to lead the offense, he killed it. Against Seton Hall, I know he shot absolutely amazing and just lit them up. And, Dozier showed his ability to lead the offense while being a great mid-range shooter, mid-range scorer. He was able to take guys off the dribble, Kadeem Carrington and guys like that, and just hit buckets, get buckets all the time. And, Dozier's one of those guys, like I said, where, what position is he going to be in the NBA? Can he be a point guard or is he just a two guard? If he's a two guard, there's concern with his shooting ability, his, catch and shooting ability, since he probably won't be able to shoot very well from three-point range. I think he'd be in that 32, 33% range if he's attempting 3 or so a game. But that's not good enough if you're not a slasher and you're not attacking the basket. But if he's a point guard, he has potential if he learns from someone to be a solid one in the future. And that's the reason why he's falling to the second round. But if you get him in the right system, he's a guy who could really stand out for your team.
Yeah, I completely agree with those two selections like Dozier, Dorsey. I completely agree with those guys. My 2 guys are, one is VJ Beacham. I think Beacham has the potential to come in and shoot the lights out for whatever team that decides to select him. I really like VJ Beacham's shot, and I think that, especially in the second, shooting is something that will translate. That's something, especially with his form, with the way he shoots the ball. I think that he can come in and really supply any team with a good shooting clip from three. And then my other one, which I have seen a lot of people saying he's probably not even going to get drafted, but I still like him and I think he can work, I think is Mike Young from Pitt. And I really think it's because, like, I've been watching this guy for a number of years now. And so, like, the biggest thing against him is that he plays more like a power forward, but he's more of the size of a small forward. He has a very nice back to the basket game. He can still shoot the three as well. And he's a very good flat out scorer. He can shoot the mid range. He can, like I said, work in the post. So there's a lot to his offensive game that I like for a team that, especially coming off the bench, I think he can be a great player for somebody. Obviously, with the concerns that, he may be undersized to play the power forward and a little too slow to play the three. But like we were talking about before, it's a lot of positionless basketball here in the NBA. So I think that with a small ball lineup kind of team, he would thrive a lot because he would play more of the Draymond role. Not saying he's anywhere close to Draymond on defense, but that kind of role where Draymond can be in the post, he can distribute from the post, or he can be at the top of the key, hit shots, open shots off of pick and pops. I think he has the potential to be that kind of guy, and I think he could really be that diamond in the rough that these teams are really looking for, especially in the second round.
Yeah. But, one thing I wanted to say about that, Alex, because, I watched Mike Young a good amount at Pitt, and when I first saw him, I forget which game it was, but he did very well. He scored in all facets, and he looked like a Paul Millsap type in that sense. Like, you look at his body and his frame, he's not nearly as big as Paul Millsap. I'm not saying he's that potential type, but he's a guy where you see him, he's like, okay, why is he not on most draft boards? Why are people not considering him in that aspect? And one thing I always like to say, I said this, so Larry Nance Jr., right? Perfect example of what people don't realize in this draft. Just because most people who heard you say Mike Young probably thought to themselves, you know what? Mike Young's not on anyone else's draft board. Why would listen? What is this? Mike Young's not going to get drafted. That's what people said about Larry Nance Jr. No one had Larry Nance Jr. on their draft board, and he went in the first round. Some people probably actually had it late second round, but the whole point being that I said before, NBA teams have a completely different list than us. Maybe a scout saw Mike Young in the game I saw and said, you know what? Top-tier talent, we got to get him in the second round. Maybe they saw that. Maybe they said, listen, he can fit in the system with this. While we might have mentioned guys that most people don't have, it shouldn't take it away from the fact that these guys might get drafted on draft day, and if your team ends up picking them, you should be happy about it.
Yeah. And I mean, just to add a little bit more to that, Mike Young was the leading scorer in the ACC.
Yeah, I think he averaged exactly the same amount of points that Paul Millsap did in college, too, to go along with that. But, he's not an unknown guy. It's just people have written him off because of his size and, because, like you said, he's kind of a three, but he's kind of not because he can't really play that position, but he's,
exactly.
He's positionless.
Plus the whole being a senior in school kind of thing.
Yeah,
so.
And that always hurts you. So.
Yeah. But anyway, hey, it was great talking the draft with you guys. We will get this up in a post as well on our website. That should be up either later tonight, early tomorrow. That'll have our whole mock draft listed out on who we had going in the first round. The video will be in there as well for anyone to check that out as well. So, great talking with you guys. And should be fun to do this next time. All right, guys. From the Basketball Society, peace.